it smelled kind of fishy from the very, very beginning, but there's not, we didn't have enough to go on to say anything about that or anything. But um, really, what ended up being kind of the catalyst for getting this whole thing going um, was one of the players that got pegged was Eni Wazirike, who had since graduated from Iowa State and was then playing for the Denver Broncos and had himself a very expensive lawyer. And turns out he has a very good one that a lot of other players that were involved in it from Iowa State also signed on with this lawyer to be part of the same lawsuit. And this lawyer has been taking the state of Iowa to the cleaners on this one, going through and found. So basically, just kind of a high level thing for. I'm sure everybody's heard of this. Anybody that's watching this show is probably at least aware of the situation that had happened. But what the details that came out the last couple of days are really, really interesting. I'll kind of give an overview of this. So there was a special agent for the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigation, the gaming division, the Iowa DCI, his last name is Sanger. He set up what's called a geofence around a couple buildings at Iowa State. And basically what a geofence is that it allows the software to track anybody within a certain perimeter, whether or not they open the app. Basically, they can't really tell what they're doing in it necessarily, but they can tell who is opening the app and where, pretty precisely, like within feet, inside this geofence. So this agent had just been recently signed to the gambling division and to the gaming division, and found out that he had this cool software that could set up geofences, and he decided, well, let's just try it and see what happens. Well, turns out you can't really just do that, because that's a pretty significant violation of privacy, from a government official, from an unelected official. And he set up this geofence. He came back and said, oh, there's some interesting things here going on or whatever with some accounts that are popping up. He took it to his supervisors. They said to stop pursuing it. So what did he do? Set up a geofence in Iowa City to target a couple buildings from the athletic department. And as soon as he found, well, there's some stuff going on here too, he took that data and the stuff from Ames, combined together, and talked to his superiors, who then decided to greenlight it despite him being insubordinate. All this, none of this without any sort of warrant or anything like that. They're just kind of a random, let's just put a geofence and see what happens. And then we're going to do it around the Iowa football facility too. And, it was pretty shady. And then the whole thing got greenlit, and then went on, and then here we are. So there's some pretty significant allegations here of like violation of privacy, violation of the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. All signs are pointing to the Iowa DCI and the state of Iowa getting housed on this really bad. It's going to look very, very ugly for the Iowa DCI. I'm sure this will take years to flesh out fully. But this is a big deal, because what it started out being a big deal because this was the first time we'd ever seen gambling accusations of any, in the modern era anyways, of athletes gambling at the college level. It's the first time we'd ever seen it. And it was brand new because sports gambling is new, relatively speaking, it's still new. NIL and all this stuff is all new. So it's a brand new world. So this was the first time that we had seen something like this happen in college athletics. And turns out it should have never happened, because the investigation should have never happened, because they had no right to continue start looking into people. Does that absolve the athletes that gambled of their wrongdoings? No, it doesn't. But there's also there's also a lot of data that the DCI uncovered, which magically ended up in the hands of the NCAA, despite them not conducting their own investigation or even asking about it. And they handed out a bunch of punishments based on charges that were apparently stemmed from data that was potentially illegally obtained and wasn't actually proven in court or anything like that. It was just an accusation of something that was actually technically not even illegal, because most of the athletes that had gotten name dropped in this case were over 21. And they were, they might have been using a girlfriend's or their mom's name or something like that for the account, but that is also not illegal. So, it's a mess, because the NCAA suspended all these athletes, and they have already served suspensions based on that were handed out based on data from a apparently bad investigation, potentially unconstitutional investigation. So You can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. They can't unserve suspensions. You can't go back in time and let Deshaun Haneke play last season. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. That's not a thing that can happen. So this is all going to get really messy because you're talking about some athletes that potentially could miss out on pro playing money. And Wazirike, who knows if he's going to play in the NFL again? That's a lot of potential future income that's going to be lost. And Hunter Deckers was a guy that people thought had a chance to eventually project to being an NFL player. I don't know if he would have a legitimate claim to that or not since he was a few years away, but I don't know. I don't know how that works. But there's potentially future earnings lost here. There's scholarship times playing, scholarship money lost here. There's a lot of damages involved here that the state of Iowa and the Iowa DCI could be paying pretty dearly for what appears to be a pretty messy investigation.
Well, Levi, first of all, thank you for explaining all that in a plain spoken way. I read all that, and we read that on the Iowa show yesterday. So I was aware of all of that and found it quite fascinating. But the one component in that I didn't know was the insubordination portion of it.
They told him not to pursue it, and he did it anyways. And then also part of the accusations of this too is that they had found data for just normal students too, that they were using the app underage or whatever it was, and they didn't pursue any of them. So not only was it kind of a bad investigation to start with, like the data collection part of it was potentially unconstitutional. They chose to only target high profile athletes at the two high profile schools in the state. They didn't go after you and I. They didn't go after Drake. They didn't go after Loris and Morningside and Clark. They didn't go after any of those. They went after Iowa and Iowa State. They went after high-profile athletes in the high-profile sports. So there's a whole bunch of this stuff that looks really, really bad.
Man, I got to kind of question his superiors because we both know that if that information was obtained illegally, that they were going down a path that they could possibly navigate to a certain extent, but that, as you kept bringing up, the best word for it is going to get quite murky and messy and just convoluted.
And it started out as a rogue agent, just going there, but then they greenlit the products of a rogue investigation. So, and this goes all the way up. Even back at last summer, Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds had said that she knew about it and that she was, just kind of waiting to see what was coming out of it. So she knew about it. Everybody from the governor all the way down to this special agent knew about this, and they knew it was shitty. Sorry, I didn't mean to swear in your podcast, but they knew it was bad. They knew it was messy, and nobody stopped it. Nobody stopped it on this entire path and said, "Wait a second, was there a warrant issued for this?" Why nobody? The attorney general, whose job it is to enforce the law in this country, in the state of Iowa, didn't stop this investigation. Didn't think to ask, "Hey, has there been a warrant issued?" I don't know. Just a tremendous level of incompetence all the way up the food chain here.
And that's what usually is the path to this kind of disaster is that, anytime there's a large story and it's like, how did this get to this place? It's, oh, well, they dropped the ball. There are all these check points and they all failed. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, though, is the age requirement of being either a legal gambler or not versus then also being an athlete. So to me, there are two violators, and then one is kind of a double violator. So you've got just the underage gambling aspect of it, and that's obviously a criminal act.
Yep. Whether or not they were caught on a legal basis or not, they still did it. They still broke the law. I mean, it is what it is there.
But even though, of course, Levi, for those athletes that are of age, they have signed something that has stated that they are not going to participate in gambling.
Yep.
So,
yeah, I mean, like, even if this all comes back and the Iowa DCI and the state of Iowa have to pay out huge damages to all these athletes and stuff like that, that doesn't change the fact that they broke rule. Like, I mean, the NCAA doesn't really care about whether it's legal or not. They care about whether it's against their rules. And gambling is obviously against their rules. So, I mean, they still broke the rules. I mean, nobody's nobody's denying that they broke the rules. Even the athletes wouldn't deny that they broke the rules. But, you know, how it got to that point is how we're going to end up with this really big, messy lawsuit that's probably going to drag on for a long time.
Hmm.
I mean, it's a fascinating ordeal that's it's unwoven over the last 8 months or so, and it's probably going to go for another year or two, just as this whole thing shakes out. And it's going to be really fascinating to watch because I really think the Iowa DCI is going to be in trouble after this.
Yes.
Like, I think a lot
Wow.
of people, I think a good chunk of people are going to lose their jobs out of this, and like honestly,
Yeah, you would think so.
it probably should.
And at that point, I don't understand the motivation. Are they really out to get or to make a name for themselves, or what is the
Well, I
motivation?
mean, the second that they making a name for themselves would make the most sense. Like, let's say someone wanted to make a play for a political thing down the road. I don't know what in their brain thought, hey, you know what, get people to vote for me. Let's bust all of the good athletes at Iowa and Iowa State. That'll definitely make people happy. But like, I think that's the motivation that makes the most sense. I mean, we might find that out later in court, or we may never find that out. But that does make the most sense. Is trying to make a name for themselves. This guy just got signed to the gaming division. He's trying to shoot up his way up the ranks, wherever. Let's get a big, high profile case that's going to go be slam dunk. We can say, wow, I did this. I took down college sports gambling. La la la. Well, there's a procedure you got to follow if you want to try to do that.
Some folks had an idea that was going on. Tom Brands, the head wrestling coach, the wrestling program, was involved in this, came out and was kind of criticizing the media today, saying that this was a possibility and that the media didn't do the work to find out. Well, these are court filings. Things aren't exactly available to the media like one might think, but this is not good for the state of Iowa. For Iowa athletes, Iowa State athletes, to me, this opens up, and I'm not a lawyer, but by the looks of it, this is a situation where these athletes could very well sue the state of Iowa and make a good amount of money, and they deserve it. I mean, Noah Shannon, it was effectively that, I don't know if you remember that commercial, Mark, with, you got to be quicker than that. The guy with the fishing pole. It was effectively that with Noah Shannon's eligibility. And it was just cruel the way the NCAA operated during all of that. And Shannon, I mean, I don't see any of these guys getting their eligibility back because they still did break the rules with the NCAA. But, I mean, you got to think they're going to be able to sue the crap out of the state of Iowa and get some money out of it. I hope they do, because this is not how things should operate in the United States of America, nor the state of Iowa. I think it's complete BS. And I don't know the intricacies of how the law works or how these people involved will be punished, but they should be swiftly, and it should be done and taken care of quickly, in my opinion. Of course, we know anything with government doesn't get done quickly. So we'll see how this shakes out.
Absolutely. And what we just learned in the previous conversation was it's one thing when there's a rogue individual that's breaking the law and trying to acquire that kind of information. But when he goes to his superiors and then he goes to the other campus and they have knowledge of this and they still take that information and still run with it and present a case, well, then yes, absolutely. Everything you just stated.